You know, the more privileged you are in life, the more of a dreamer you are, the more these bumper stickers are going to inspire you. But the more pragmatic, the more realistic, the more seasoned you are, you're not going to fall victim to these bumper sticker ideas. If, for example, one of you was to come to my office and say, I want to quit school and travel around the world, or go live in the woods like Enkidu, like Gilgamesh, like the hippies used to, I don't think I can get the proper life experiences by sitting in classrooms and doing ridiculous work and reading ridiculous books and listening to ridiculous people. I just want to go out there in the nature and just live my life. If it was outside of academia, I would probably grab them by the throat, kick them a little bit. But because I don't want to lose my job, I look at them and say, listen, you're 18, just put your behind, on the seat, do the work for about 5, 6, 7 years. You'll be 25, 26. And if you do things the right way, by the time you're 25, 26, you may even have your PhD. Then if you want to go goof around, go goof around. And when life slaps you, at least you'll come back into life, into the city life, with a good amount of power. You have a master's or a PhD, but should you leave school at the age of 18 and you want to go out there and figure out what your passion is, and that usually takes a while. It really does take a long, long time to figure out what you're good at. And most of us are not good at anything. And the truth is, these days, it's very, very tough to be just mediocre. Get a job, go to school, do a 9 to 5, pay your bills, pay your rent, be good to your parents, be good to your companion. I mean, these are difficult things to do, not to watch porn, not to smoke, not to drink, not to hang out with losers. Just do that. And this day and age is enormously difficult. I think that's the spiritual path these days, just try to keep up with the simple things in life. Once you've been able to kind of keep up with these things, then if you want to become, something more than fine. But what you have is, people who can't talk, who can't think, who can't walk, who can't do anything. And yet they're encouraged to go out there and figure out what their passion is. This idea about death is good. It's something that the Buddhists talk about all the time, that if you truly want to know the value of time, know the value of life, know the value of what it means to be young, what you should do every night before going to bed, close your eyes, sit somewhere, and imagine that you're in the presence of your own corpse. It's sitting right there in front of you. You're no longer attractive, you no longer smell good, everything about you is decaying, decomposing. And if you do this the right way, you have a different set of emotions that are horrifying. It's like a slap in the face. They'll wake you up, and then you begin to re-evaluate, what you want to do with yourself. But that's really for very, very advanced people. Yeah, no passion. Just be ordinary, just be mediocre, for now. Once you've knocked on a lot of different doors and they've opened and you realize that they're not really nourishing you, then if you want to do something different, fine. You have a guy, he thinks he's A, time passes, he comes to realize he's not A, and once his history, his narratives have been removed from his psychology, he doesn't know what to do. He can no longer go back being the prince or the pharaoh, he can no longer go back thinking that he's a father or a husband, and metaphorically he enters a desert. And that's symbolic for all of us in this class, that you have an identity for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you're an artist of sorts, you're a husband, you're a wife, you're a professor, whatever the case may be, and something happens to you. And it can be all sorts of different things. It's, in the spiritual tradition, this first stage is titled the call. It's kind of like the phone ringing and you hesitate picking it up because intuitively you feel like there's this devastating news coming your way. So you let it ring and then it stops, then it rings again and then it stops. And it's very similar to the life story of Leo Tolstoy. When he was 5, he looked at his mom and he said, "Why am I here?" And his mom just simply gave him ice cream and the question went away. At the age of 10, he asked his father, "Why am I here?" And the father bought him a bicycle and the question disappeared. And then 15, the question came forth very intensely, but all of us are cunning and deceptive. We lie to ourselves relatively easily. And so he was cunning enough to push the questions away. And then at the age of 25, again, the question came up, this time much more forceful. He couldn't simply just push the question away. He had to think about it, feel about it for a week or so. And eventually the question disappeared because the body can't really handle too much intensity. And then at the age of 35 or so, the question came away and it could no longer be pushed aside. And he lost sleep, he lost rest, he lost a lot of weight. He began to hate his wife, he began to hate his kids. And that's how it happens. And so Leo Tolstoy, very much like Moses, was told certain realities about, or certain narratives, information about his life. And if you happen to be, tragically enough, in the right place in life, information or data as such are not just going to come to you and simply pass by. They're going to go inside you and stay there. And as you begin to think about them more, feel about them more, they'll begin to create a nice little home inside you. They'll be your roommates for a long, long time. And you want to make it work with your companion, with your kids, with your job, with your boss, with your class, but nothing works. And at a certain point, kind of like Francis of Assisi, you look at your father and you say, you have given me this name, I want to give it back to you. You look at your mom and you say, you gave me all this clothes on my back, I'm going to give it back to you. You look at society and you say, I have your desires within me and I'm going to give them all back to you. You become completely naked, inwardly speaking. And it's a difficult place to be because you're subject to the forces of the external world. People are going to make fun of you, they're going to call you depressed, they're going to call you a little crazy. Your parents will tell you need therapy or drugs. Your friends will try to kind of hone you in with their ridiculous ideas. Or you may, accidentally, unfortunately, listen to some radio host telling you that you should go out there and figure out what your passion is. And so you roam around the desert for a long, long, long time. For those of you who enjoy reading books, there is a children's book. It's called The Knight in a Rusty Armor. So there is this knight who wears his armor every morning and goes into the battlefield. And it happens to be wintertime. It's raining, it's snowing, it's windy. But the nice thing about this particular knight was that he would come home, remove his armor, take a shower, and spend some time with his family. But one night he says to himself, I go out every morning at 3, I come back around midnight, it'll take me an hour to remove the armor. Why not just sleep with the armor on? I'll just put a garden hose inside my armor, I wiggle around a little bit, put some shampoo, and I'll be clean. And that's what happens. Every night he goes home, he doesn't remove the nuts and bolts, the armor remains on. He puts, the garden hose inside with some soap or shampoo, and he cleans himself the best he can. There is this visor that he has, it kind of goes up and down. His wife can at least see his eyes, see his face a little bit. And the kids feel okay with just seeing a little bit of their father's physical body. But there comes a point that even this visor doesn't go up anymore. It's rusted. Everything about the armor is rusted. And one day his wife goes to him and says, listen, if you don't remove this armor, we're just going to leave. And the guy says, I am the knight of the king. I am the best knight that he has. Do you think I'm going to give this up for you and my kids? No, I'm never going to do that. Live with it. And of course, women in the ancient days, being very passive, says, okay, comes back after a few weeks and says, I can't do this anymore. I want to hug you. I want some intimacy. The kids want to hug you. They want to kiss you. You're like RoboCop. In his case, Robo-Knight. And being a man, being somewhat stupid, he doesn't much care or finds his wife's comments very valuable. So he says, whatever. One day he comes home after the battle and the house is empty. No kids, no wife. He says, okay, that's fine. He has a Vitamix blender. He makes some shakes for himself, drinks it through a straw. He goes out in the morning, he comes back home and there's no one there. And he feels a little lonely. And little by little he begins to miss them very, very, very much. And he tries to remove the nuts and bolts, but they're not movable. And he goes around the city telling everyone, is there a way that I can remove my armor so I can just be free from it? I want to see my own face. I want to see my own body. That it's no longer he's missing his wife or his son or daughter. He actually misses himself. And ultimately he knocks on this door and this wizard shows up. His name is Merlin. And he looks at Merlin and says, can you help me remove this armor? And Merlin says, yes. How? Are you sure? Yes. I'm going to put you in this house called the House of Silence. You have to live in this house until you achieve complete silence. Initially, of course, this knight assumes that by silence, the magician means that you just don't talk through your mouth. So he sits, he doesn't talk to anyone. And after 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, the magician comes forth and the knight says, I have been successful, I haven't spoken to anyone. And the magician says, no, you have a good amount of internal dialogue. Your past, your present, your future, your memories. Silence, complete silence. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do. And for those of you in this class who may one day take a religion class, either from me or some other idiots, when you talk about various traditions, there is always this exercise called fasting. I come from Islamic tradition. From the time the sun goes up to the time the sun goes down, you don't eat, you don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't do anything. And one of the things that happens when you don't feed yourself is that you have no energy to think. You have no energy to have any desires, because everything that you do, whether physically, emotionally, intellectually, or even spiritually, they require energy. Your body is nothing but a container of emotions, thoughts, and some spiritual fantasies, you know. And for those of you who really want to kind of enhance the way you think and feel, whether feeling about your past or feeling about your spiritual self, if there is such a thing, you need to know how to exploit, manipulate your physical body. You need to put it in the proper physical space so that the sort of desires you have can come to blossom. A magician tells him that you have a good amount of history inside you, and inside your head is a good amount of noise. You have to quiet everything down. He doesn't know what that means yet, and he sits and he thinks, you know, kind of like Westerners. You know, you sit somewhere on your yoga mat and you just keep saying Om, 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 and eventually you will attain quietness. And it takes him many, 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 many years. And eventually, after about 5 or 6 or 10 years, the nuts and bolts come off and he's free of the armor. Once he has quieted down the noise of the past and the future, what happens is Merlin comes in and says, now I'm going to put you in the house of knowledge. But by knowledge, I don't mean that you go to Berkeley Library and you just gulp down all the information, live in books. Knowledge equals wisdom. And the problem with wisdom is you don't know what it is. You don't know where you can go to get it. And you don't even know if you have the talent or the capacity for it. Most of us have the capacity for information, raw data. You know, what to do with it, who the hell cares? As long as you can walk in the classroom and just open your mouth and just rap for an hour and 10 minutes. Long story short, what you have for all of us is that you kind of come out of your mother as a blank slate. You have nothing really written on you. As you move through life, you begin to have more and more and more layers upon you, like the armor. You know, and there comes a point, you look yourself in the mirror and you say, I have no idea who I am anymore. So that is what you have in the life of Moses. And remember, the life of Moses should never be taken literally. It's metaphoric. At a certain point, all of us in this class will eventually have no choice but to look ourselves in the mirror and realize that we are not who we thought ourselves to be. And it's a horrifying place to be, because the moment you begin to ask such questions, what you're basically saying is, you know, it's like waking up next to your companion and saying, do I really want to be here? And what in essence you're saying is, it is true, I've been with him or her for about 5 years, but the history is no longer relevant. I don't really care if you went to Yosemite 20 times. I don't care if you got like 24 kids. I don't care if you have the same bank account. I just no longer feel intimate. And it's a devastating place to be, because the history no longer connects you. The narratives, the psychological narratives no longer connect you. And you kind of feel exploited. You kind of feel alienated from the relationship. You still do the work, but you just don't feel as if you belong in the relationship. And from that point on, it's compromise, it's just hanging on, making sure that what lives inside you don't leak out. Your companion doesn't need to see all of this. And Moses, you know, tries to kind of seek advice from his mom, from his dad, from whomever. But eventually, when you kind of come to a question that really belongs to you, it's a question that lives inside your soul, if there is such a thing, nobody can, from that point on, deceive you. You'll catch them. And you know when they're being dishonest. I think even they themselves will refrain from deceiving you. They'll just tell you how things are. And knowing that your past can no longer give you relevance or meaning or value, metaphorically, you begin to live in the desert. And the desert means there is no past. You become completely passive. Your past no longer moves you. Your kids no longer move you. Your wife or your companion no longer moves you. Your job no longer moves you. That I'm like a corpse. I walk around, but there is no life, no passion inside me. And in the desert, the problem is your companions are scorpions, are reptiles. It's the scorching sun, it's the sand, and nothing grows. به کشت خاطرم جز غم نرویه، به باغم جز گل ماتم نرویه، به صحرای دل بی حاصل ما گیاه ناامیدی هم نرویه. Not even the weed of hopelessness grows. There is nothing that grows in this desert of isolation. And you have to survive it. I don't know how people survive it. And my experience has been it's best if whenever these questions come up, just push the questions away. Make sure you run away from these questions. First, because this is not a culture that is philosophical. This is not a culture that's reflective. This is not a culture that has given us myths that will protect us in case we fall.